Welcome back to an obscure tour at the edge of the internet. I am your host, the Nameless Tour Guide, and I've been away from this fun side project for a while, and I've returned to celebrate Halloween once again. Solera of Astora is still inside waiting to be deconstructed, but for now I just thought I'd take a more relaxed approach to things and do it in the most terrifying style known to man, the PowerPoint presentation. So let's dim the lights and go back in time to my Prepare to Die version of Dark Souls. As you can see, some truly horrifying things have occurred here. Some wicked force has taken away my sky, and left me with the stark truth of Lordran. So much has happened since I've been away, most importantly. Stranger Things stole my Kate Bush song, Running Up That Hill. There was an idea that I had that if I died too many times in the last episode, at some point I was just going to start playing that song over and over again. But Sondheim, Dickens and Jung got me all the way through. In that song are the lyrics, I'll be running up that road, be running up that hill, be running up that building, which describes the path between the fire and the Silver Knight. It was a very clever joke, and if only I had done it, I would have looked like I was from the future. And quickly on those lyrics, so much heat for the ones we love. Tell me, we both matter, don't we? The lament of Velka here in Dark Souls. Fortunately, I still have Babushka to throw in at some point. And also, let's feel sorry for Arthur Brown once again, the god of hellfire himself, the artist who invented metal, as described in the Painted World episode. Always the Easter egg and never the artist making bank. Hopefully he's getting a cut of the t-shirt sales. So this episode is going to be very different from the rest. The time I usually dedicate to this type of thing has gone into playing Elden Ring, and while I'm here the people of the lands between go without a champion. While exploring that very, very large world, early on I met this character, Bloody Finger Hunter Yura, who when explaining Dragon Communion will tell quite simply the cycle of the dragon I have been building up to over many episodes of this tour. And as I kept going I noticed, and this will be different for everybody, that the key elements of the storytelling are explained more directly than in the original Dark Souls, which this tour is about. So in that spirit, rather than the usual hinting at this or that, I'm just going to be very straightforward and direct about everything, as I pick out random thoughts on Elden Ring, because why not? And in doing so cover some of the alchemy as well. But at the same time this is a Halloween special, so it's going to be stupid as well, because that is my favourite part of the original Dark Souls and this time of year. Why did Goldmask throw himself from the highest bridge in the lands between? It's a metaphor for a huge number of things, and its meaning will be different for each of us. My mind went immediately to the idea that he was going to have to go deep on alchemy to cover the other half of his calculus, and frankly, jumping off a bridge seems far more practical. But of course, it's more likely to be a parable about loss of faith, which we will be getting to at some point in this episode. The previous version of alchemy was going to be more like everything else on this tour, just a nod towards the concept. Here is the Mutus Liber. If it interests you, enjoy the journey. My main concern here is Dark Souls. Even when I'm talking about Sondheim, it's always about Dark Souls. So why Sondheim out of the many artists I could have covered, which we will return to at some point? Astora is a real place, the Astoria Theatre in London that is. The Astoria Theatre was a theatre where artists who inherited the hellfire of Arthur Brown recorded live versions of their work. It was torn down just before Dark Souls started development. A few blocks down the road is the Sondheim Theatre. While I know this seems like a stretch, and it is, and you can disregard it as we discussed in that episode, but this is a known design trick. When you need to design something efficiently but radically, as Miyazaki does, you grab or are given a core idea and go deep on it as quickly as possible, building up a huge collage of visual ideas, and you try to take as many twists and turns as possible. Then you come back and consolidate around the original concept. The original concept of Dark Souls, I believe, was Nazi zombies, an overdone but pitchable game cliché in 2008. I believe Miyazaki then took that original concept and overlaid it on a pre-existing idea, which was the cycle of Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne, which I believe he had formulated earlier, which we will discuss later. Sondheim was an amazingly successful gay Jewish artist, 3 categories of people who were persecuted under the Nazi regime captured in a single person. Also linked to metal music, a popular form of music in Germany, and also a part of the neo-Nazi culture. As I told you, this episode is going to be very direct, and I'm hoping for some silliness soon. Back to the lands between. Random thought number 1. Elden Ring is Dark Souls 4. Now before you turn off the video and discuss, let's address the elephant in the room. Miyazaki said he was done with Dark Souls. And I believe he knew someone was going to ask that question because they always do. and on that day he was there to sell Elden Ring. And what he said was that he was done with Elden Ring, but he was happy for someone else to interpret the world. And they already had. George R.R. Martin had been given the structure of Dark Souls and asked to write a new story using the same archetypes. No need to steal from Paul Akar anymore. Now Miyazaki had the money to pay demigods like Martin to write his story. This was always the plan for Dark Souls. They had a bumpy start. Back in the day, Miyazaki said he planned Dark Souls to be a collection of cliches, gameplay and lore-wise, that he would reuse for future games. I have not played Bloodborne, so I do not know how these characters are treated there, but I do know about Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 is a retelling of Dark Souls from the perspective of a character trying to make peace with their sins. I believe that character is Menace, and him dealing with his destructive obsession with Priscilla, represented by Nissandra and King Vendrick. At the beginning of the game is Velka. Menace recalls being cursed by the dark sign, and then the fire that comes afterwards, the melting of the family he had created. To make amends, Velka sends Menace to the Tree of Fire butterflies that lead him to our first glimpses of the land that we call in Elden Ring the Lands Between. The problem was fans of the series didn't want to go to this land. Where was Andre of Astoria? Where was Lordran? This was Dark Souls 2, and players still wanted to know the story of the firstborn of Gwyn. Miyazaki ran up against human psychology, something he understands very well. My belief is he then created Dark Souls 3, the fan service game, to calm the base, and immediately knew the best thing to do was not name the next game in the series Dark Souls, so that he would be free of expectations. So how do we see that in Elden Ring? Most neatly, the 4 Belfries. Tower 1, the crumbling ruins in the skies, Dark Souls 1. The 4-headed Dragon Lord, the first Elden Lord, is the 4 Kings of New Londo. Sen, Gwendolyn, Manus, and Havel the Rock are the names I use for those characters, all coming out of the actual first Elden Lord, Gwyn. This is how birth works in Lordran. Male characters have Caduceus burst out of them, as we see with Champion Grundy in Dark Souls 3. Gwyn births all 4 kings himself. Tower 2, the chapel you enter the game by without the storm. Stormwind Castle is the first castle in Dark Souls 2 that the giants bombard. The item description talk about the missing region king, Vendrick, and the storm that lashes Dranley Castle in that game. Apologies if I'm getting some of these names wrong. I'm keeping all this a bit loose this episode, so I'm just doing all this from memory. Tower 3, the world of Endless Night of the Eternal City. Pontiff Sullivan's dream of the happy ending of Lordran that is shattered. Now wait, that's me hinting at things again. We shattered the Elden Ring in Dark Souls 3. More on that later. In that area, we find the mottled necklace, the idea of a being ascending to a higher order of existence. In the Painted World episode, I hinted at a moment I found quite powerful in Dark Souls 3, when sunshine falls on my baby, the lyrics of Jimi Hendrix, and in that moment the Elden Beast is born. That's right, the Elden Beast is in Dark Souls 3. But I need a break, so first I would like to share with you something truly terrifying. This is a true story. I was up late one night studying the Mutus Liber for more insights into Dark Souls lore when I fell asleep. Anyway, I awoke, and the Reddit thread that I've been using for my in-depth research had vanished, and instead the screen had switched across to Twitch. And it was a weird stream I'd never seen before. It was all black and white and blurry. Anyway, suddenly it snapped into colour, and this figure in a cloak said that if I spread the word of his master, that he would show me what I truly wanted. The true opening cutscene to Elden Ring. 7 years I had waited for an epic opening cutscene. I had the lights dimmed and audio raised, ready to be teleported to a new world. And all I got was some graphic novel BS. I scrambled for OBS and hit record just in time. The opening to Elden Ring, the scene where Velka, forever cursed for her unforgivable sin of studying the Dark Soul, returns to eternal torment.
Who is that?
You broke the rule, Zelda. Your soul belongs to me now.
Mickey?
You now dwell in eternal flame.
I remember this place. Long ago when I was 5, I snuck in the kitchen late at night and ate a donut with a maple glaze. My father asked who ate the snack. I said that it was my brother Jack, and Jack grounded for 14 days. I lived with that guilt all of my life, and the terrible vision that I had that night. No, please, I don't want to go back. Now my soul is cast from the earth whence forth he fell. The path of fire leads me to spooky morning hell dream. Welcome back to spooky morning hell dream. Spooky morning hell dream now. And now I've gone and done it again. Committed another awful sin. And my mission companion all alone. Spooky tooth. Oh God, how could I have done this to you? How could I break Rule 72? And now my soul hath just been thrown back in the spooky morning hell dream. Down, down to Satan's realm. See where you belong. There is nothing you can do. No escape from spooky morning hell dream.
You blamed your brother for eating the donut? And now you walk out on your mission companion? You're a dick.
I'm sorry! Jesus hates you, this we know. For Jesus just told you so.
You remember Lucifer?
He is even spookier.
The robots will yell at me again now, but oh well. So what is happening in Elden Ring? This requires me to take a moment to say, well, I told you so. That's right, Saint Trina is a man and a woman. The most shocking revelation in Elden Ring. The one-eyed god that exists here in Dark Souls, the Black Dragon Calamite. In case this is your first episode and you made it through the Book of Mormon bit, well, first off, well done and welcome to the tour. In the last Halloween special, I discussed the idea that dragons that are born from Priscilla are able to make illusions of women to trick warriors. These children are Sen, the firstborn of Gwyn, Gwyndolin, and Calamite. They have 3 illusions, Velka for Sen, Guinevere for Gwyndolin, and Dusk for Calamite. Please see the previous episodes to see how you get there, the simplest being the Dark Moon Blade Covenant ring that says this is what happened with Guinevere. Saint Trina, the one-eyed god, is the character I call Dusk/Calamite, and is associated with the Fire of Ruin. I finally have a name for the 4th flame of Dark Souls, which I call the Eternal Flame. Just as it is in Elden Ring, it is the remains of a fell god. Let's quickly do the flames. We have the Flame of Frenzy in Dark Souls 1, that is the Chaos Flame of the Witch of Izalith. As you can see in Elden Ring, by the end of Dark Souls, the Witch of Izalith learns to reach out and embrace her children, which is something her children immediately regret as they become cursed with her pain and madness. The Witch of Izalith is a withholding mother who seems to abandon her children to the world. She is captured in Dark Souls at the Viling Shrine, with a child wrapped and not physically touched. At first this can be seen as cruel, but what the Witch of Izalith can be seen as doing is protecting her children from her madness. Next we have the Blasphemous Flame. In Dark Souls 3 this is given the name the Profane Flame, which I call Jerry's Flame, as a joke reference to Jerry from the series Rick and Morty, and this flame is here in Dark Souls 1, the Flame of the Way of White, associated with Nito and Havel the Rock, both wonderfully comical fathers. And just like Lord Rykard, Nito feeds himself to his wife Priscilla at one point, as does Havel the Rock. And finally we have the Flame of Ruin, which I call the Eternal Flame, which is here in Dark Souls but never mentioned explicitly. A terrible thing happens in Dark Souls. Gwyndolin is killed. He is the Fell God. To make a flame you need to sacrifice something to burn. Gwyndolin sacrifices himself to save the world, just as Dialos in Elden Ring sacrifices himself to save the Jars of Jarberg. What did you tell Dialos at the end of his questline? Did he save them? Back to the Elden Beast, with all that out of the way. In Dark Souls 3 there is a handmaiden in Viling Shrine, just down from Andre Vestora, and she is the main merchant of that game. That is Sen. He is there the entire journey, just as fans wanted. The Firekeeper is his illusion this time around. That is why she can be killed without consequence. Why all the intrigue? Because he has been pulled back into his own personal hell to pay for his sins. I said a long time ago Dark Souls was never meant to have a direct sequel, Part of the story is Sen realizes true loss after Gwendolyn sacrifices himself. He lost the brother he loved more than anything else because of his foolishness. Sen is the one who teaches people how to make extra flames using pyromancy. Sen then finds a way of dealing with this and becomes an everlasting dragon, leaving Sif the Scalers and the Daughters of Chaos to deal with what remains. But Sen suffered the worst fate that can befall a fictional character. He became popular, and after a failed sequel, he was dragged out of retirement because he had done a deal with the devil. He studied the Dark Soul. Only one character may know the Dark Soul, the Furtive Pygmy. And the Furtive Pygmy is you. That's right, you listening to my voice. Did you forget yourself in Lordran? Don't worry, many people do. In the DLC of Dark Souls 3, after you fight the Father, you can teleport from that room to the Dredge Heap. Atop the Dredge Heap, you will meet the Handmaiden at the end of the world. After talking to her and buying the last items, she'll turn into a cocoon, and then after that, a wonderfully horrifying beast made of lightning can be seen circling in the sky above the cathedral. Sen ascended to a higher form of being, a true god, the Elden Beast. There is a painting motif in Elden Ring. This comes from the painting lady also in that DLC. She is crafting a new world for us with the dark pigment. The painting is of the white bark of the Erd tree. And on that character, that is the fourth child of Priscilla, and the child of Havel the Rock. That is why she has no name. I said in the previous Halloween special that the character was Fina. I have been thinking on that and decided that Fina was actually the first version of Sen's illusion, which is abandoned and replaced with Velka. Havel the Rock's child is never named, an unborn child of Priscilla. In Dark Souls 2 there is a stone petrified egg, and its item description asks the question, what does a petrified egg harbour? One of the many answers to that question is something that will never live, but something that will never suffer. Put another way, something that will never know flame. Sen is there in Dark Souls 3 when Pontiff Sullivan's eternal peace is shattered and the Lords of Cinder are returned to their thrones, reuniting the four Lord Souls and recreating the first flame, which Sen quickly steals from the devil as the incantation is complete. He had given us what we wanted, 80 hours of gameplay, and in return we brought him the fire he still craved. Which finally brings us to alchemy, which is the glue that holds all of this together. Alchemy is so difficult to talk about because, as I was building up to a year ago, it is pure chaos. Alchemy can be seen as the shadow cast by organized religion, as some believe, and is why it is associated with Satanism and witchcraft. Though alchemy can be seen also as the shadow cast by any form of order that we impose on the universe as humans. It is a consequence of reason, and it's not the only one. And so if you know a version of alchemy, it will probably be different from the alchemy I'm going to talk about. Alchemy is whatever you want it to be. The trick, like all things Dark Souls, is to focus on the similarities, not the differences, and also to realize all things are true if you or anyone else believes them. Even if you change your mind, that thing remains true. It is the world of imagination and abstract thought. Which sounds like it's trying to be deep, but it isn't, nor is it trying to be. One of the challenges about talking about alchemy is it is the realm of flim-flam artists. And so at points you may have thought this tour sounds like a weird self-help podcast or trying to persuade you of something other than observations and theories of Dark Souls lore. That's the alchemy coming through, as well as the cycle story, which are connected concepts. Alchemy and the cycle story have elements that lift us up as living gods, while at the same time crushes our souls with revelations we are hollow pre-programmed beasts and nothing more. As I said in Sen's Fortress, and I'll repeat here, Dark Souls isn't directly laughing at you, it's just laughing at life. But of course you are free to be insulted by anything or everything in Dark Souls, just realize it's not the core motivation. So if you're new to alchemy, welcome to the terrifying world of the occult. Some people say this knowledge is cursed, so watch out for that. Let's start with this one. The green lion eating the sun. In alchemy there are two elements that are called Sol and Luna. Sol is the sun shown here and represents masculine aspects of human nature. Luna is the moon and represents feminine aspects of human nature. Belfry Sol and Belfry Luna in Dark Souls 2 are nods to this. Solaire of Astora is a symbol of Sol. Gwendolyn had aspects of Luna and so was raised as a girl and so is a symbol of the moon. But what does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? Especially when you're in a fictional world and we are free to define things the way we choose. It means whatever we want it to mean. See, pure chaos, and this is just the beginning. What we need to do is put a lens on this to control the chaos. The lens we can put on it here is Elden Ring. Godfrey took the beast Sarosh onto his back, and this made him a lord, the lion that eats the masculine force of Godfrey and tamed him. This is what this picture is said to represent. The lion is an acid which burns away the sun, allowing a man to transcend to a better state of being, a woman. Are you insulted yet? You are free to be if you want, but remember that's not the ultimate point. This image represents the story of Godfrey, and it is here in Dark Souls 1, and that is the role of the four Knights of Gwyn, which are given the symbol of the lion, and are here to curtail the masculine forces as defined in the world of Dark Souls 1. Godfrey, by extension, defines the masculinity found in Elden Ring. Does this representation hold true for you as the player? The job of the artist is to make sure it does. The joke of all this gender confusion found in Dark Souls and Elden Ring is none of these characters are male or female. We assume these genders ourselves as we move through the world, using symbols we have collected from our lives. The big question is, why do people believe this is what is represented in this image? The answer is, somebody made it up one day. Nobody knows who. But the idea resonated with people. A beast that can melt away masculinity was a symbol that intrigued the alchemists, which are mostly male scholars. There is a lot of attempts in media these days to represent a wide variety of archetypes based around gender, race, sexuality, and physical appearance, and Dark Souls was doing this in 2010. But for all the different archetypes the series has presented to us, one is missing. The person who keeps the flame is always a traditional female character. The Firekeepers in Dark Souls, all the way through to Melina in Elden Ring. Men cannot be finger maidens. It has been decided for us by the artist, something the artist is aware of. In the description of the Missionary Cookbook, it describes a man who was unable to become a finger maiden and therefore became a missionary. Would we ever believe that Sen could be a firekeeper? That was a long random thought, but sets up my thinking on Elden Ring. So let's grab another one. Renala is an illusion. Radagon did it once, why not twice? Queen Marika is the queen that represents faith. Radagon needs to learn sorcery and therefore creates a second queen, Renala. It would explain the strangeness of her boss battle, which teleports to a moonscape in the middle of nothing. She is the black-haired witch Velka from Dark Souls 1, similar to Rosalind in Dark Souls 3, who is a symbol of Velka in the Cathedral of the Deep. And just like Velka, she pines for someone irrationally after they are abandoned. To become a god in alchemy, you must master three aspects of life: sorcery, the power of the stars; faith, the power of divinity; and also alchemy itself, the power of fire. The three aspects form the basis of the magic systems in Dark Souls and in Elden Ring. Which also means there is a missing queen, the Queen of Fire. It is interesting that Saint Trina has a torch, and it is found in the north with the Flame of Ruin. In the Halloween episode last year, I mentioned that Velka was the smartest character in Lordran. She is the smartest character because she is thrice wise. She mastered sorcery, faith, and alchemy by the end of her journey, making her a stand-in for the originally Greek god Hermes. But something strange happened to Hermes that does not usually happen. He was stolen by the alchemist. I've talked a lot about plagiarism in this series, and that's because of this aspect of alchemy, which is celebrated in Dark Souls. Alchemy seems to be created around the 1st century AD, and yet alchemists believe Plato and Aristotle, who existed 400 years earlier, are alchemists. Some say they stretch back to the ancient Egyptians, and this is true because they believe it. Plagiarism is a funny thing. Putting aside the modern obsession with fame, prestige, and material gain that comes with that act, plagiarism messes with time. Suddenly, by stealing the cliches of ancient Greek philosophers, alchemists are able to project themselves to places they weren't, and take over ideas that weren't theirs. Is this plagiarism dangerous? Some proclaim yes, others no. But this is part of Velka's story. She takes ideas that do not belong to her, and uses them without understanding why they were forbidden in the first place, and ends up getting Gwyndolin killed and locking herself and the other kings of New Londo in an unending cycle of torment. This is why she needed a new world and became Radagon, but of course you don't escape that easily from the furtive pygmy, and they arrive just as they always do. How we enter the world in Elden Ring is the same as how we enter the world in Dark Souls, by the Ember. The difference being in Dark Souls 1, we are brought in by Anastasia of Astora, who is in Elden Ring, surprisingly. In Elden Ring, we don't need to be brought in by anyone. We already know the way to the things betwixt. Hermes in the Greek mythology is the messenger of the gods, a concept that resonated with people that came across it, a god who spoke to us mere mortals about divinity. And this idea was so captivating, he became the breakout character of Greek mythology. Other gods became known as Hermes. The ancient Egyptian god Thoth was Hermes. Importantly to Dark Souls, the Norse god Odin was Hermes. People really liked the idea of the god that came to visit for a short while before heading back to the realm of the gods. And so the alchemists stole him, and Hermes became their god. And in Elden Ring, George R. R. Martin stole the god of the alchemists and created the Imperium Melania, everyone's favourite boss battle. Melania must have her flower bloom 3 times to become a god, because that would make her thrice wise. Melania never knew defeat, and as Pontiff Sullivan would tell her, to become a true god, you must know loss. Next random thought, Miquella is just an arm, Melania's arm. Apart from the humorous but immature idea of Mogwin sharing his bedchamber with just an arm and wondering why his dynasty has not started yet, this is how I see the world of Dark Souls. Characters grow out of each other, which is captured amazingly in Dee's armor set. The large golden brother trying to protect the small silver brother from the world. The story of Melania and Miquella, the story of Sen and Gwyndolin. This can be seen in the Shaded Castle, which is similar to the Earthen Peak in Dark Souls 2. In the throne room with the Knight of Thorns, you will find a table at the front of the room. There is 1 chair, but 2 places have been set. And speaking of that area, they killed Trusty Patches. That I was not ready for. But after the shock wore off, I realized that was the point. Sen's usually hiding from us in Dark Souls. In Elden Ring, he's not hiding. He's in the center of the world, waiting for us to come for him. Sen's plan this time is death. He wants an honorable death. Finally, maybe that will stop the endless cycle of torment. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It all depends on where we go next. We should be returning to the actual Lordran if the series is oscillating between the 3 levels. It's almost midnight and I'm running out of time, so one final random thought. Rennie didn't kill Godwin. Well, she did, but it's not really like that. Mesdames and Messieurs, if you'll hear me out on this, when Miyazaki presented an actual cutscene to the world to show off Elden Ring for the first time, he showed the Knight of the Black Knives, and with it he announced a murder mystery written by the demigod George R. R. Martin, who loves to steal the cliches of the gods, like all good writers. A conspiracy of the highest order, a messy conspiracy that was being covered up in front of our very eyes. If the center of the world was Sen, that means the ice witch had been frozen out, and no one defies the dark moon that easily. Frozen, ice witch, that reminds me the most important part of this episode. Dark Souls was heavily influenced by one of the most chilling Japanese horror films of all time, Angel's Egg, the story of shattered faith. There's a lot of Christian imagery, the lost faith of its creator, Mamoru Oshii. It also has a mixture of alchemist symbols as well. The vessel used to carry water are alchemist symbols, as well as the idea of the egg child, a saviour-like figure for the alchemists. It's about an hour long, and if you're interested, it's on YouTube and worth a watch. But be warned, you may not be able to sleep afterwards. Loss of faith is a recurring theme in Dark Souls and Elden Ring. The shattering has happened time and time again, and yet the cycle continues. The answer to this conundrum may be in this secretly recorded footage I found on the web of Sen and Priscilla's early discussions about destroying the Elden Ring many ages ago. That was a bit long, but you never cut such a great version of Defying Gravity. In 2003, Gregory Maguire and his partner in crime Steven Schwartz stole the cliches of L. Frank Baum and MGM films and wrote the musical Wicked, the story of two young women dealing with a society that would oppress them. One welcomed, the other spurned. Galinda, more commonly known as Glinda the Good, and Elphaba, more commonly known as the Wicked Witch of the West. The story was a scathing critique of post-9/11 America and the policies of the Bush-Cheney government of the time. But that political message did not resonate with audience as much as the story of sisterhood of the two main characters, as they dealt with problems common to many of us. This show was so successful, a decade later, Disney, the company that owns the right to every princess they could steal, were furious they could not steal Elphaba and Glinda, and so they made their own, resulting in this. Which led to Blythe's armor set. Blythe was a blade of Rennie, but the cold never bothered him anyway. Ipso factorio, Dark Souls and by extension Elden Ring is based on the most harrowing of Sondheim plays, Follies.
Phyllis!
I'm here, Ben. I'm right here.
Sally? You all right? Come on, kid. Hey, it's me.
I left the dishes in the sink. I just left them there. I was in such a hurry. And there's no Ben for me, not ever any place.
There never was. And that's the truth. Come on, honey. I'll take you home.
I can't stand up.
I'll help you.
I should have died that first time.
Cut that out.
I should have been dead all these years.
Don't talk like that. You've got a lot to live for. Friends, home, some money. Come on, say it after me out loud. Friends,
Friends,
home,
home.
we're gonna get some rest. And then we'll make plans for tomorrow.
For tomorrow? Oh, dear God. It is tomorrow.
I've lost my jacket. There has to be some way. I won't face another morning feeling... Oh, despair. I'm sick to goddamn death of it.
Amen. It's easy. Life is empty. There's no hope. Hope doesn't grow on trees. We make our own. We're starting as of now, and I'm here to tell you, it's the hardest thing we'll ever do.
I've always been afraid of you. You could see straight through me. And I always thought that it isn't possible. It can't be me she loves.
Well, think again. Come on, we're going home.
You're really something, aren't you?
Bet your ass.
Hey up there, way up there, what do you say up there?
Hi,
Girls,
Ben.
Sally,